My name is Philippe Lucas, and I'm a master's candidate in the Studies in Policies and Practice program at the University of Victoria. I'm a graduate research fellow with the Centre for Addictions Research of British Columbia, Victoria City Councillor, and I'm also founder of the Vancouver Island Compassion Society. After finding cannabis helpful in addressing the symptoms of Hep C that I contracted to a blood transfusion when I was 12 years old, I gave up a career as a school teacher to open up the Vancouver Island Compassion Society, or VIX, in October of 1999, and this organization, which celebrated its 10th anniversary on October 1st of this year, is currently helping about 1,000 cannabis patients throughout Canada. Over the last few years, we've incorporated much of our experience and understanding of cannabis therapeutics into an extensive research agenda, which is something that's unfortunately missing from our federal government's own medical cannabis program. The late 1980s and late 1990s were the peak of the HIV/AIDS crisis in America, and there seemed to be little that can be done to keep an entire generation of young men from withering away as a result of what would become known as AIDS wasting syndrome. In response to this rapidly expanding epidemic, compassionate community activists in San Francisco established underground medical cannabis dispensaries offering a safe source of cannabis to those needing it for medical purposes. The success of these dispensaries was one of the factors that led to the passage of a state ballot initiative called Proposition 215 in 1996, making California the first U.S. state to allow for the legal medical use and distribution of cannabis. Since then, over 1,000 medical cannabis dispensaries have opened up in California, and it's estimated they currently supply over 500,000 state-authorized patients. There are currently about 10 well-established dispensaries in Canada providing over 15,000 Canadians with access to a safe supply of cannabis. Vancouver's British Columbia Compassion Club Society, the oldest and largest of these organizations, was incorporated as a non-profit in 1997 and now serves over 5,000 members. Over the last 7 years, only 3 federally funded clinical research protocols have been started, and one of them, a study on cannabis, nausea, and appetite in AIDS sufferers, was cancelled when Health Canada withdrew its financial support. In June of 2004, the Canadian Institute of Health Research suspended the entire clinical cannabis research program, citing they couldn't guarantee funding past 2005. The final nail in the coffin came in the fall of 2006 when the federal government announced it was not going to supply the $4 million needed to revive this research initiative, leaving university-based researchers and NGOs like the VIX the task of rediscovering the therapeutic properties of this medicinal plant. Although the lack of federal support for medical cannabis remains a challenge, published data reflecting the experience of thousands of medical users has already highlighted many new indications for cannabis-based therapies, and including its potential to treat addiction by reducing problematic use of other licit and illicit substances such as alcohol, opiates, and stimulants. At the VIX, our early studies were pragmatic investigations of phenomena noted in everyday interactions with medical cannabis patients. We make a number of strains available to our members, and there was some speculation as to the different effects of the 2 major subspecies of cannabis, sativa and indica. We designed a strain symptom survey asking our members what symptoms they experienced and which strains they preferred, and the results of the survey suggest that those suffering from chronic pain as their primary symptom favor the use of indicas, while those suffering from nausea and loss of appetite prefer sativas. This proved to be interesting and useful data for the VIX and its members, and we can now more confidently recommend specific strains to alleviate the symptoms of certain conditions. So in 2003, we teamed with a doctor named Diana Silvestri from the University of California, San Francisco, to develop a research protocol investigating the treatment success rate of people suffering from hepatitis C who had used cannabis during interferon ribavirin treatment, which is the treatment that most people go through for Hep C. Dr. Silvestri's previous research has shown significant increases in both the end treatment response rates and sustained viral response 6 months after treatment of Hep C patients who used cannabis when compared to those who didn't use any illicit substances. The amazing thing is she also she was testing to see if people who used illicit drugs in general did as well. And it turns out people who are using heroin or cocaine or crystal meth actually had a very poor success rate, around 12 or 15%, But if she included the cannabis users in that drug using category, the drug users were doing better than those who didn't use any drugs at all. And so she had to split out the cannabis folks, and that's how she saw the cannabis folks were doing better than the people who weren't using anything at all. Suggested that a retroactive survey might be able to identify women who felt they benefited from the use of cannabis while pregnant. Here's what we found. Of the 79 women who filled out our survey who had experienced pregnancy, 40 had used cannabis to treat nausea and vomiting while pregnant, and 92% of these rated cannabis as effective or extremely effective at treating their morning sickness. The study concluded that these findings support the need for further investigations into cannabis therapy for severe nausea and vomiting during pregnancy. So for our next collaboration, I teamed with Dr. Andy Hathaway at the University of Guelph to design a research protocol to poll end users of our federal medical cannabis program, something that Health Canada, by the way, has never bothered to do. We launched the study in the spring of 2007. It's called the Quality of Service Assessment of Health Canada's Medical Cannabis Program, and it combines a 50-question survey addressing the personal experiences of patients in the federal program with 25 semi-guided interviews, and it's funded by the McMaster University's Arts Research Council. Here's a brief summary of our findings, the rest of which will be published in 2010. Over 90% of patients report not all strains are equally effective at relieving their symptoms. Now that's important because Health Canada only supplies a single strain. 97% state a preference for purchasing cannabis from a source that offers multiple strains. So once again, Health Canada simply not listening to patient experience here. 90% preferring to have access to multiple methods of ingestion, such as baked goods, tinctures, oils, and hashish. And those are things and products typically just found at community-based dispensaries. And 75% of those who tried the Health Canada cannabis ranked it as either a 1 or a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very poor and 10 being excellent. We asked the same thing. We asked the patients to rank their own cannabis, and they ranked it between 8 and 10 generally, whether they're getting it off the black market, growing it for themselves, or through dispensaries. Additionally, in 2008, I undertook the first comprehensive policy overview of Health Canada's medical cannabis policy and practice, which concluded that despite spending over $30 million to date on this federal program, there's a growing body of evidence that it's not meeting the needs of Canada's medical cannabis patient community, and that it actually may be acting as an impediment to safe and timely access. The study makes several recommendations to improve medical cannabis access in Canada, including the need for a federal audit and review of the government's medical cannabis policy and practice, for cost coverage of medical cannabis by federal and/or provincial healthcare programs, since cost has proven to be a major impediment to access for many medical users, and for the development of a cooperative relationship between Health Canada and compassion clubs to both improve patient access and to jumpstart research into the safety and therapeutic potential of medical marijuana. Citing Alex Woodax's work on the ethics of drug policy, this study concludes that the viability of the federal program will depend on the government's ability to shift away from deontological approaches based on oppression and moral regulation and towards consequentialist policies focused on benefit maximization for medical cannabis patients, which is a term coined by my friend and fellow panelist Ken Tupper in publications addressing ayahuasca-based therapies. In a project supported by the University of Victoria and the Centre for Addictions Research of British Columbia, I'm currently examining substitution theory and the potential of cannabis to be used in the treatment of problematic substance use and addiction. Now, this area of research could radically shift the popular perception of cannabis as a gateway drug, leading to the use of more addictive substances, to that of an exit drug, helping people control or even end their addiction to potentially more dangerous substances, including alcohol and tobacco. The development of community university research partnerships with compassion clubs is a remarkable act of resistance to the prohibitionist ideology that dominates our federal approach to substance use, and has proven incredibly successful at giving voice to the lived experiences of this marginalized community of critically and chronically ill Canadians. By engaging and empowering patients through joint knowledge creation, medical cannabis dispensaries and university-based researchers, like many of the people in this room, continue to challenge the government's failed federal policies, shifting Canada's medical cannabis program away from policies driven by fear, ignorance, and prejudice, and towards patient-centered practices based on science, reason, and compassion. So my thanks to CSSDP for putting on this fascinating conference, and to all of you for your time and attention. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.